So hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I have my white shirt on. That's because white shirts are generally easier to clean. Of course not the stains are always hard, but white shirts are it'll be a whole mess. This fucking kitchen light is killing me. Let's move it over here. Or how about, oh, yeah, this is better. This is better. Shine this shit like right into my eye. So, there's this argument going around on Twitter every now and then where somebody's like, it costs nothing to be kind. And then somebody responds with, actually, it costs nothing to be mean either. And, upon reading that, something in your head, because something in my head went that way, something in your head would tell you immediately, no, something about that doesn't make any logical sense. And the fact of the matter is, it does not. It does not make any sense because, as a matter of fact, it costs quite a lot to be kind, actually. It costs very, very much to be kind. But it also goes the other way as well. It costs to be cruel or to be mean, but I'll get into that in the later half of the video. But for starters, let's start ahead with the argument of it costs nothing to be kind. You see, for starters, when you are kind, right, you need to understand how to be kind first. You need to understand other people's positions first, other people's perspective first. You need perspective, you need understanding, right? You need to be able to be patient and actually listen to the other person and to not completely overlook their behavior. It costs a lot to be kind, and it costs a lot of skills to be kind. But, when you hear that, you might be a little bit discouraged because then you're like, oh my God, if it costs so much to be kind, and then, I had this thought as well. Lots of people don't deserve kindness, so why should I be kind if it's hard and if the people don't deserve it? Well, oh my God, fucking, it's a terrible idea. Hold on, I'll just put it to my side. Make myself look ominous and mysterious. Ooh, I'll turn off the light in the background to make it to just sell that point even further. I am ominous and I am mysterious and I know more than you do. Now you have to be very careful who you're being kind to, and as crazy as that sounds, it really is true. I was just wiping my lens there. Hold on. There we are. Now you get to see me in the HD vision. What the fuck was I saying again? Oh my God. And the most important part is that builds a level of trust, that builds a level of commitment. If you are kind, you build human connection. But right, here's one of the things where it goes wrong. You could be the kindest person in the world, right? You could be the kindest person in the world without being an enabler. That's like one of the most prominent issues with being kind in the modern day. It's that most people don't really know what being kind is, so instead they just turn to like enabling every single action that the other person takes, which then in turn leads to the other person subconsciously taking control of you, or rather just using you. That is a very common scenario, and it happens quite often than you might think. Alongside just being, generally understanding of somebody's position, understanding of somebody's pain, having their perspective, sharing in their perspective, and also being very patient with them. You have to understand when to help, what helping actually means, and how to help without compromising or without sacrificing yourself. Compromise is fine. Compromise is good, as a matter of fact. And it's a very needed thing for all relationships, platonic, romantic, familial, any. It very much costs to be kind. It costs a lot to be kind. You have to be taking multiple things into account at the same time, right? You have to not be enabling someone, but also there's all the things that we mentioned beforehand. You have to be understanding, you have to have perspective, you have to have patience. And so with that in mind, you might now be wondering, right, again, so like, it's so hard. Sorry, Pepsi break. Again, you would be wondering, oh my God, it costs so much. You will be having multiple bouts of doubting whether you should be kind to people at all. Because in your head you're thinking, oh my God, it costs this much, and I thought it cost nothing before. So, because people say being kind is a good thing, and I don't really understand what being kind actually gets to you. Should I be kind at all? And that's the sort of thought that I've been on for the past several years, since like 2018. And then it's been progressively building until now. So 7 years of like, with the ultimate conclusion that, yeah, it absolutely fucking pays to be kind. It absolutely pays to be kind. Because, again, it's just like I said at the start of the video, when you are kind to people, you build human connection. But where I went wrong, I went wrong in a lot of different ways when I tried to be kind. At first, I had this sort of premonition that being kind means I have to give everything that I have to the other person, that I have to put myself down all the time. This is sort of the general thinking that has happened thanks in, turn to I'm not going to finish that sentence, but generally in culture it's seen as in a lot of societies it's seen as the right thing to see yourself as little, to put others up on a pedestal, and then to sort of support them, give all you have to them, sacrifice yourself to them. And that's why I don't really like sacrifice that much, because again, you're ultimately, when you sacrifice yourself for somebody, you're giving them a lot of power. So unless it's like, I give my life to save yours because I want you to live and I'm gonna die anyways, that's a good sacrifice, and I would do that sacrifice every single bit of the time. Actually, no, that's not sacrifice, because you were gonna lose your life anyways, and so you save the person. You don't sacrifice yourself, you save the person anyways. When you sacrifice yourself to someone and you live, right, and you live, again, you set the precedent into the other person's head that it's fine to take from you, and that you're going to be absolutely fine with it, and that there's going to be no stipulations that sort of come with it. So no consequences of this other person sort of taking advantage of you. And so, because we're all so very selfish creatures, and we're all like subconsciously thinking all the time without ever putting it into words, the other person, right, the person that you sacrifice for, ultimately comes up with a conclusion that it's all right to take and take and take and take and take from you. Sorry, my fucking phone ran out of storage. How did that happen? Now, some people might think that they will always have a support system because they have a family. But quite frankly, that's not true. There's this like really awesome popular saying that people use all the time. Blood is thicker than water, they say. The full quote is actually, the blood of the covenant is thicker than water of the womb, which is quite literally to say that familial relationships will always mean less than the blood of the covenant, which, it's used for religion, but it can be applied here in this case, because the covenant ends up being kindness and human connection, the connection that you build using kindness and trust and a whole lot of like patience. You might be asking yourself, what is my point in saying any of this? Because I think right now, as we have a very sort of distorted view of what kindness actually is. We see being kind as sort of sacrificing and giving everything that you have to the other person, or vice versa. And then they romanticize romance, actually, so much so to the point where, okay, it's done exporting, so which means I can fucking delete all this crap. Boom, delete. Just gonna click one of the episodes to see if it works. Yeah, it works. Okay. Back to my phone. There we go. The fuck do you mean 7 minutes of storage left? So being... Yeah, that's right. The whole point of this fucking video. On one hand, I want to clear up any sort of misunderstandings that people have, because, like, the argument was made that it costs nothing to be kind, and when somebody, the person who made that argument, was completely wrong on both accords, because what it ended up doing, the results that it ended up having, was that people made a counter argument saying that it costs nothing to be mean or to be cruel, which in their sort of argument, it is actually true to some extent. And on the other, it actually ended up negating a lot of the kindness, or negating some of the urgency that kind people have, or negating some of the importance that kind people have. Because when you say that kindness costs nothing, it costs nothing to be kind, you're basically saying that it is absolutely worthless to be kind. What you actually want to say is that it takes no effort to be kind, but even if you do end up phrasing the sentence that way, even if you do end up phrasing the argument in that way, you're still terribly wrong because it's just not true. It costs so much, it takes so much effort to be kind. It costs so much to be kind. And so while I understand that the intention of the argument came from a good place, right? It's to encourage more people to be kind. It ended up failing in the most spectacular way because it ended up creating these more people who, despise the idea of virtue signaling. Because by saying something like, it actually costs nothing to be kind, you actually ended up creating this like stigma against people who view themselves as kind. I mean, virtue signaling is a pretty prominent issue. I think at the end of the day, we all want to be good people, right? And it applies to both sides either. We all want to do what is right. But as it stands right now, there is something fundamentally wrong with the way that these people who are claiming to be kind are, sort of going about things. There is something seriously wrong with that. And the people who are saying, oh my god, team mean, who say, it also costs nothing to be mean, who are also wrong, by the way, I completely understand why they hold these kind people in discontempt. Because although each side has good intentions, but there is so many misunderstandings that are just completely creating more and more rifts as we go along. So what I mean to say is, the people who are saying it costs nothing to be kind are seeing the people who say it costs nothing to be mean as absolute evil, disgusting creatures. Beings of cruelty. Comedic villains to be knocked down a peg. And so it ends up creating this war. But on the other end, right, the people who are saying it costs nothing to be mean see the people who say that it costs nothing to be kind as sort of self-pretentious fucks who only want to like seem cool to other people. In short, virtue signalers. I think a fucking mosquito bit my ankle. Son of a bitch. So let's look at it from the other angle. It costs nothing to be mean. Now on the surface, right, it may seem that way. But what's actually true, right, because there's a cost to everything, and at the end of the day, being mean is ultimately an action. Essentially what it is it's very easy to pick. Being mean is always easier to pick than being kind, because when you choose to be mean, when you choose to be cruel, you're basically saying, your feelings don't matter. I won't be patient, I won't be understanding, and I will refuse to have anything other than my own perspective. Any perspective other than mine. What ends up happening when you do end up picking that choice, right? If you do pick that choice, is that you lose human connections. People don't want to talk to you because you are a mean piece of shit who only cares about himself. Because this ends up bringing the entire argument of sort of selfishness, selflessness. Me personally, I think that selflessness is an unobtainable ideal, and that people should focus more about selfishness, in which cases, which cases are right, which cases are wrong, what is morally acceptable between the two. What's the difference between the two? Because there's two different, multiple different ways of being selfish that people just don't understand. Because my phone is about to run out of storage, I can't get into that topic. So as it stands right now, it costs, it certainly costs. It costs much more to be kind than to be mean. But the payout, or rather the consequence of both, are where sort of the differences, the main differences between the two come along, right? One is easier, one is harder. But the one that you worked harder for, just like art, if you work very hard on something, you get something very great, which is a sense of fulfillment, a sense of value, a sense of meaning, purpose. You did something that matters. And if it doesn't matter to anyone else, it at least matters to you, and that's the most important part. If you work hard, you get exactly how much you pay, how much you worked for. It's not about work. It's not about like actual employment. It's more so about working on yourself, investing in yourself. You're not doing somebody else's work. You're doing work for the sake of your own benefit, for the sake of your own improvement. Whereas if you end up taking the easy option out, which is what a lot of people do in the modern day, they just run away from choices. They choose inaction. They absolutely choose ignorance, like 9 out of 10 times. It is absolutely insane to me how ignorant people choose to be. What you get in return is multiple years of never changing and growing as a person. Your life is just completely in standstill. The fucking video stopped recording. So the consequences of being kind are actually really good, because you get companionship, you get friends, and you get a better sense of understanding, you get more value in life, you get more meaning. Right? Because you didn't just like take the easy way out. You fought hard, and you got what you wanted in the end, and something about that just makes you feel really, really content with yourself, content about living, and you want to live more. But I think one of the reasons why people don't really want to live anymore is because they keep taking the easy options out. They keep running away. They keep choosing ignorance. When it comes to the topic of ignorance, I would split them into sort of two different categories, right? One is willing ignorance, and the other is unwilling ignorance. Unwilling ignorance is when you're genuinely ignorant. As in, you are 5 years old, you have no idea what the fuck is going on. Whereas willing ignorance is ignorance that you choose. You see something and you pretend like you didn't see it. You do something bad, and something bad, you get the terrible, terrible consequences, or somebody else shoulders the terrible consequences for you, which makes it easier for you to like phase that shit out of your mind because you didn't suffer. And you pretend like it never happened. That is willing ignorance. I know for a fact that every single one of you know that it genuinely is worthwhile to be kind. But because you can't justify being kind to people who aren't kind to you, you end up saying, actually, no, being kind is so cringe and so L, so I'm not gonna do it. Instead of just working for what you want, which is you want more people to be kind, you want to be kind yourself, and I know this for a fact, so don't try and fuck with me. I know exactly that you want to be a good person, that deep down you want to be the right person, that you want to do what's right, but you've been hurt so many times that you just completely fell into this fucking trap of, what's the word, nihilism, where it feels like nothing you do has any purpose, has any meaning, has any substance, has any value, and so you end up losing your faith in other people as well, alongside with it. And I think that's a very pathetic way of going about it. Because I have been through that before, but every single time I've been faced with a problem of nihilism, I've always been able to reason myself out of it. So it's not the fact that it's hard to reason that you're not like moving on from nihilism. It's the fact that you don't want to work anymore that's exactly getting in the way of you moving past your nihilism, because you're not stupid. As a matter of fact, you're very smart, and I know for a fact that you can care, that you can put in the effort. But you just choose not to because you're so scared of getting hurt again, that you're so scared of getting disappointed again, that you don't even want to try anymore. And I know a lot about that. I know a lot about being scared of disappointment, being scared of getting hurt, and I used to run away all the time too, but now I understand. But now I understand that just running away doesn't actually do anything. Inaction, ultimately, at the end of the day, is still action. As crazy as that may sound, not taking action is quite literally a choice. When you choose an action, the only thing that you delay is when, you process it in your head. Which means, right, which is to say, because you physically cannot move on, because you mentally cannot move on from that moment when you had to take action and you ended up dodging it, it's going to come back to you eventually in the form of like trauma, in the form of like discontent with yourself, in the form of dissatisfaction with life, with living as a whole. There's so much to this conversation of being kind, or whether there's any point in being kind or any point in being mean, whether there's a point to anything at all. That's just so extensive. It's a very extensive topic, and it requires a lot of different perspectives and a lot of different information, and quite frankly, I don't have it in this very short span video. But what I can tell you for certain right now, the definitive answer that I will give you is that it absolutely costs everything, it costs a lot to be kind, and you should be kind, right? Because you're dedicating yourself into it, you're committing to it. You will find that if you do end up actually trying and putting in the effort and actually risking yourself for once, you will find that you build genuine, satisfying human connection that you will carry on for the rest of your life and that you will cherish. Whereas if you choose the easy way out, if you choose to run away, from your responsibilities, well, I mean, you don't have to be kind. You don't have to be kind. It's in your best interest to be kind, but you can also choose to be a piece of shit as well, and nobody's ever going to like you and talk to you. I mean, take for example, Sneeko. Is anybody ever talking about Sneeko at all these days? The last time I heard of him, he was talking about how the age of consent should be brought down to like 12 years old or something. Absolutely mental shit. And since then, I've never heard of him since. Charlie shat on him during stream when he said that the fucking that children can consent and that the age of consent should be brought down to 12. When Charlie shat on him, I haven't heard of him fucking since. He had his like 5 minutes of fame wherein he attracted a lot of attention from people that genuinely disagreed with him because his opinions were very obviously disagreeable. He is gone now. Is anybody ever fucking talking about Sneeko anymore? The answer is no. The answer is no. So we have that very real life example of, where being mean takes somebody. Because that guy was a genuine piece of shit to everybody, including himself. Because, God, how could you fucking live with yourself acting like that? But let's take let's take an example of the other way around. When being kind actually paid off. Right? Say, for example, MatPat. Ooh, MatPat. One of the most beloved YouTubers to ever exist. He was kind to everyone. Well, he wasn't exactly perfectly kind like 100% of the time, but he had his heart in the right place, and he definitely did do according to that. He had multiple charity live stream events for cancer research for children. He has contributed a lot to smaller content creators. He has changed the platform and changed the way that gaming videos are generally made, because he ended up like nuking, right? Straight up nuking the popularity of creating theories, right? And being very invested in game series or just any sort of media in general, straight up to the moon. Because now, in the modern day of 2025, there are so many theories, so many different games, so much lore, because it changed everyone. It changed the way the players think. It changed the way the game developers thought. And it gave so much more sort of like, it gave the theorists that already existed before him a genuine platform to share in their own thoughts, to share in their own theories. That's where kindness gets you. He didn't do that shit by like closing himself off and refusing to think of other people and refusing to understand. The reason why he got everything that he wanted in the end was because exactly he invested himself, he put himself on the line. He cared enough to actually research into things that he genuinely cared about. He invested money, time, and effort into people, and now he's going into politics. And now he's genuinely going into politics, and he's trying to like make a difference so people could be happier, so it could be better for people. That is where kindness takes you. And then the funniest part is, kindness isn't necessarily a choice that you make all the time. You have to choose kindness the first few times. But then once your brain gets hooked up on the adrenaline that you get from being kind, once you start to realize just how much value you get from being kind, you start to do that shit automatically. It comes to you naturally. Because that's how versatile and powerful it is. Whereas the people who chose being mean over being kind are now home alone in their parents' basements, talking about how the age of consent should be lowered down to 12, or how Hitler was right, while constantly complaining about how shit their life is. Because truthfully, it is shit. I agree with you. Your life is shit. But the only difference is that they're saying it's unfair, and I'm saying that it's a product of their own choices. It is their direct consequence. It is the direct consequence of their actions or inactions that led to exactly their life being shit. And I agree with them that their life is shit. But here's the most important part, right? We know for a fact that these people were wrong, that they took the most terrible choices, that they made the most terrible choices. They chose the stupid path over and over and over again. But at the end of the day, they're still human. They were misguided. They are misguided. And so we shouldn't just say, throw him into jail, send his ass to the penis explosion chamber immediately. We shouldn't be doing that. Because a lot of the reason why people double down, especially in huge arguments, is because they feel like if they back down now, that there is no coming back for them. Or no, they feel like they've gone in so deep that turning back now is not a viable option. And so they're scared, even though deep down that they know what they need to do. They know what they want to do. They feel like they don't deserve it anymore because they finally realize, it finally gets through to them in their head just how shitty they were. But then they take the stance of, I'm irredeemable. I should be punished. And therefore I will play my role out until the very end because I'm scared. But again, it's just the same cycle of shit. The only difference here is that you're slightly more aware of how fucking stupid you were being. To summarize, these people, they made stupid choices, but they're not stupid people. They made stupid choices, but they're not stupid people. You have to constantly remind yourself of that. These people aren't willingly evil. These people aren't willingly stupid. They're just misguided and misinformed. And at the end of the day, they're still human. They could be better. They can improve. They can change. That's one of the greatest sort of advantages that we have as human beings over the other animals that led us to be the apex creatures on this fucking planet. We have the capacity to get better, to improve. Whereas the other animals always pursue the common sort of what they were used to. Fucking hell, the video stopped again. Whereas the other animals always focus on keeping the status quo, staying as comfortable as possible. We risk ourselves. We put ourselves on the line to improve our lives, to improve our situation. And we've come to this point where we are now apex creatures, but we're losing sort of, or no. I was about to make an argument, but I realized that maybe it's not true. Anyways, if you disagree with me, go into the comments. Please, if you disagree with me, don't keep that shit to yourself. Talk to me. I could be wrong. I understand that. So just convey that to me and go into the comments and tell me exactly how I was wrong. In 4 minutes into the video, you made a weird face while you were saying it, so I don't believe you. Even something as insane as that. Please just talk to me. Let's have a conversation about this. Why are people not talking more about this? So, it costs a lot to be kind, but it also costs to be mean, to be cruel. And the difference is, whereas if you pick the harder option, middle finger. If you pick the harder option, you get a more fulfilling life. But if you pick the easier option, fucking middle finger again. If you pick the easier option, then you will have an absolutely shitty life, and you will know it, and you will hate yourself for it. But even if you do end up down that route, just know, never forget that you can always change yourself. There is always capacity to grow. There is always potential to grow. You can always get better. So talk to me about it in the comments. Let's have a discussion. Let's have a discussion about it. That's enough for me in video form.